Bonjour! Welcome to a new episode of So French, a podcast about the twists and turns, intrigues and insights to all things French.
Every 2 weeks we select the best, most interesting and fascinating of French news stories, all brought to you from our studio in the heart of Paris. My name is Sara Bertilsson.
My name is Stefan de Vries. This week we'll tell you about the scandal shaking the French media world, sex, videos and journalistic ethics.
And another scandal, 55 years ago this week, which hardly ever gets into the media limelight.
But first we go to Calais in the north of the country. This Monday, the French authorities started the evacuation of The Jungle, the now infamous migrant camp, hosting around 6,500 migrants, and some NGOs even say 10,000 people are living there. Around 1,500 of them are children, and the operation will probably last all week. Dozens of buses have been rented for the occasion to take the migrants to a large number of transit centres across the country, and over 1,000 police forces are deployed in the area. Now, Sara, tell us, what is the jungle exactly?
Well, it is this camp that has been set up by people arriving in France wanting to go to the UK, actually. These migrants, they don't want to stay in France. They see a better future for from themselves in the UK, and many also have relatives living on the other side of the channel. This camp has been an issue for French authorities for years. It has grown bigger, and then the numbers sometimes go up, they sometimes go down, depending a little bit on the situation in the world. But they sort of never really managed to find a solution for this issue. And of course, we know that the people living in this camp are trying to cross the channel, many risking their lives, jumping on trucks, trying to run through the tunnel, getting on top of trains or on top of trucks. It's an extremely difficult and dangerous situation.
Now, this problem is not new. The camp has been there for many, many years. There are also other camps in the same region. Why is the French government doing nothing to help these refugees other than evacuating the camp this week?
Well, the thing is, it's also a diplomatic issue between France and the UK, because France considers this as very much a British problem, since Britain is not part of the Schengen collaboration and agreement. And the UK, they don't want any of these migrants to come into their country. So no one really wants to take responsibility. And what France is afraid of is setting up a camp that would become a permanent camp, a permanent migrant camp in France, which is what no one in the country wants.
So now it will be evacuated. The French are finally tackling the problem, but will these people really leave? Will they come back, maybe?
Well, the thing is that these people, many of them, they don't want to stay in France. They want to move. They want to go to the UK. So what the fear of many, and I think that they have reason to believe this, is that they will evacuate this camp and then people will just come back.
Yeah, that's what happened already in the last
It's what happened
10, 20
already,
years.
exactly.
Yeah.
And every time they try to evacuate it, people are coming back because they don't want, many or most of them, they don't want asylum and they don't want to be settled in France. They don't speak the language, they don't have their family here, they don't see a future for themselves in the country. So they want to move on.
Yeah.
And so there's no solution. It's not solving the bottom issue here, that these people, they don't want to stay in France. They want to move on, but that road is still blocked.
Yeah, and there's, of course, a geographical reason why they're there, because Calais is the closest to the UK. It's only 30 kilometers. Now, the French are not really doing anything about this problem, but there's a person who sort of resists. She's doing something that's not very common in France. I'm talking about the mayor of Paris. What's she doing, Anne Hidalgo, Sarah?
Yeah, because it's not only Calais who has been seeing migrant camps. Here in Paris, we've seen migrant camps several places around the city. Actually, it's not proper camps. It's just people staying outdoors, using, very, very little, nothing over their head, just literally living in the street. And the mayor of Paris decided that she couldn't stand this anymore. She couldn't see herself in the mirror, she said. And she couldn't take the fact that the government is not doing anything about it. So she decided to open 2 migrant transit centers, it's called. One in the north of the city, which will be able to accommodate single men living here or arriving in Paris, and another one in the south of the city, accommodating women and children. I think about 1,500 in total, and it is just a transit center, so this is not a permanent camp. This is a place for people to come to have the situation assessed and then
but it's better than nothing still. And she's doing something brave.
It's very brave, and the thing is, she said that from the beginning she launched this project, and she said, "I will do this. The government can say whatever they want." Just remember, this is a socialist mayor talking about a socialist government, but they are really not taking this issue and this question and problem the same way. But she said that I will do this no matter what. If they want to help out with money, happy to take the money. But if they don't want to pay, if they don't want to be part of it, we will do it anyway. So.
Okay, well.
So this supposed to be opening this month, and then the second transit center at the end of the year. So we'll see what will happen. Of course, this is not uncontroversial.
No.
One must remember her fellow politicians are not all excited about the plan.
Well, at least Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, is doing something about this crisis. It is expected that some of the refugees who will be transported this week from Calais to other centers in the country will go back to Calais because their only objective is to make the crossing and to find a job in the UK. So
there was one anniversary or commemoration this year. It was 55 years since the so-called October Massacre in Paris. I just had to tell Stefan, had you ever heard about this massacre before you moved to France?
No, never actually. I learned about it a couple of years ago, and really shocked me that I was not aware of this awful event in 1961, and it's also something the French don't really like to talk about or seem to talk about because, what actually happened on 17th October of 1961, we were in the middle of the Algerian War, the Algerian Independence War, the former colony fighting against France, which finished in 1962. So this was really in the middle of the War of Independence. And there was a demonstration in Paris with of people who were in favor of independence. And then what happened next, Sarah?
Well, they were protesting against a curfew that had been put in place against people only of North African origin. So it was a very targeted curfew. And the reason for this curfew, put in place by the police in Paris, was because there had been a series of terror attacks of the 2 months preceding this curfew. So the police put in place this curfew. People, of course, coming out to protest against the curfew and for independence of Algeria. Tens of thousands of people coming out in the streets, and the organizers were saying this was This should be it must be a peaceful demonstration, no arms, no violence. But then what happened is you have different views, but there was clashes between the police and the protesters.
As so often happens still today, and when there are demonstrations in Paris. Now, one of the details of this massacre is that it was taken out under the orders of Maurice Popon. He was the head of the Parisian police. At that time, he was a very respected police chief. He would become a minister a couple of years later under President Giscard d'Estaing. But what nobody really knew at that time was that he was also a very enthusiastic collaborator of the Nazis in the Second World War. He was only discovered in 1981, so 20 years after this massacre, and then he was convicted in 1998, so almost half a century after the war. So the French police force was led by a Nazi collaborator, and he gave the orders to attack the demonstrators.
These protesters were thrown into the Seine, and the numbers of the victims, they're quite. It's not very clear how many actually died. France finally acknowledged that this massacre even took place, and they've acknowledged about 40 deaths. But people who were there at the time are talking about 200 victims, maybe sometimes some even say like as many as 300.
So over 300 victims of Algerian descent who died in 1961 after police brutality. And even now, 55 years later, the French prefer not to talk about this horrible event. And now it's time for our almost traditional scandal of the week. This time it's a pretty serious one that involves our colleague journalists and also the freedom of speech. It's all about iTélé, one of the many 24-hour news channels we have here in France. And iTélé is owned by the businessman Vincent Bolloré, who is the owner of the Canal Plus network. And this week, the journalists of iTélé went on strike. Why was that, Sara?
Well, the thing is that the Vincent Bolloré, the owner of the channel, decided to put on air a man called Jean-Marc Morandini. This man is very famous here in France. He, for all the audience, knows him very, very well. He's a radio and television presenter who has been active for decades, I would say, here in France. But he's not uncontroversial. He, and especially at this very moment, he was a month ago put under formal investigation for having sexually abused minors. Very, very serious charges. And the charges is that a young man filed complaint after he was supposed to do an audition for Morandini, who also has a production company. He was asked to come home late in the evening to this man's house, get undressed, strip naked, and then masturbate in front of him.
Yeah, in order to get a role on a TV show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it was actually a movie. But then there are other accusations of similar behavior from his people in his in the production company. So this, of course, very, very serious accusations. Putting him on air is very controversial. He has been dropped by other employers who are saying they're suspending their collaboration with him because, they want to await the trial and see what comes out of this. But not Vincent Bolloré, who goes against his whole newsroom, actually, and even his close collaborators, from what I've heard, and making sure that Jean-Marc Morandini takes to the air and has his show on this news channel. Yeah,
it was really peculiar because the only thing that was broadcasted live this week on iTélé was actually his show. Usually they're live 24 hours, but they voted again to prolong the strike. It's not sure how long it will go on. But Morandini says, what they're doing lacks of journalistic ethics. And he's of course mentioning... He's of course talking about his, they're supposed to be his colleagues, but they went on strike because he is innocent until proven guilty. Now that sounds like a fair argument. What do the journalists say about this? What's their reaction?
Well, they're using exactly the way of journalistic ethics, but in the other way of saying that as long as it's not clear what has happened, he's under formal investigation, it's very serious accusations, and he is putting their whole credibility at stake. And of course, but this, we must remember as well that this is a channel who is undergoing a massive change. It's going to change name, it's going to change its whole programming, it's going to probably change its whole direction. So the fact that the strike at this channel is not only the arrival of Morandini at the channel, it's the whole change of direction of the newsroom and the channel.
Yeah, Canal Plus. Now Canal Plus, iTélé. Now Canal Plus, the mother company of iTélé, is Europe's largest pay TV company. They had more problems in France the last couple of months, but this time the direction did something peculiar. They proposed to journalists who did not agree with Morandini on the screen a severance package. So it's either take the money and run or shut up forever. Yeah,
but we're just wondering what is the plan with all of this, because Vincent Bolloré himself is not explaining, is not saying anything. There are rumors that he has some kind of personal debt moral debt to Morandini, who was one of the figures and characters who actually lifted another channel in the group, and that he now has to pay him back for this. But it sounds like a very, very big debt. It sounds like a very high price to pay for that kind of thing. There are also other rumors saying that he actually wants to make the channel go bankrupt, that he actually wants to close it down, and he wants to close down the whole network. And, you know, he has been sort of joking about this earlier. When he took over the channel, I think it was last year, he was saying, well, you know, maybe we should, if it's not working, if this channel is not functioning, maybe we should just close it altogether. But that was said in a kind of in a way like almost like a joke. But at this moment,
it seems that his plan is working, because advertisers are leaving the channel because they don't want to be associated.
They refuse to be part of this program and to be connected and in any ways with this man.
Yeah, it's a very sad story, and of course we express our solidarity with our colleagues at iTélé. Well, that wraps up this episode of So French. You can follow us on Twitter @SoFrenchNews. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please send us an email. Our address is sofrench@sofrench.news.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast in iTunes or in SoundCloud. And you can also find us on the TuneIn radio application. And share our podcast with your friends. We will be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. We hope you will join us then. Thank you for listening.
Au revoir.